Hey everyone, welcome. Today, we're doing a real deep dive into something that's absolutely critical for fiduciaries, the Nominee Doctrine. Now, this is a technical one, so if you're someone who handles post-mortem tax reporting, especially when there's trust income involved, you are definitely going to want to pay close attention. This is one of those essential compliance tools you just have to have in your toolkit.
So, let me paint a picture for you, and it's one that probably sounds all too familiar. A client passes away mid-year, say March 15th. Then, months later, their broker issues just one single Form 1099 for the entire calendar year directly to the trust. But wait, we know the tax code demands precision, right down to the exact date of death. So the big question is, how do you fix this all-too-common mismatch?
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to define the problem that the tax code itself creates. Then, we'll get into some key concepts you need to know, like IRD. After that, we'll get to the good stuff, the solution, the nominee doctrine, and the exact steps for reporting. We'll even cover some tricky rules for specific assets before we wrap it all up with the key takeaways.
Okay, first things first. Before we can even talk about the solution, we've got to wrap our heads around the problem. And the problem is created by the Internal Revenue Code itself. You can think of it as a statutory wall that gets built instantly at the moment of death.
And right here, this is the root of the whole issue. Treasury Regulation Section 1.443-1A2 is incredibly clear. A person's final tax year ends exactly on their date of death. Not the day after, not the end of the month. It is a hard, bright-line rule that, let's be honest, automated brokerage systems are just not designed to handle. And that's why we get that single, messy 1099.
So for most of our clients, the ones on a cash basis, the rule for what goes on that final short year Form 1040 is actually pretty straightforward. It's not about what they were owed or what they were entitled to. The income had to be either actually in their hands or, and this is the important part, constructively received by them before they passed away. That's it.
Okay, so we've got the problem down. Now let's build our toolkit to solve it. There are three big ideas we have to master here. Something called income in respect of a decedent, or IRD for short, how that's different from just inherited property, and the absolutely crucial doctrine of constructive receipt. And that brings us right to Internal Revenue Code Section 691, which defines IRD. Really, the best way to think about IRD is that it's the catch-all. It's for any income that falls on the wrong side of that date of death wall we talked about. The person was entitled to it, maybe it was a final paycheck or a bond interest payment, but it just wasn't received, actually or constructively, before they died.
And this is why getting this right is such a huge deal. The stakes are really high here. You see, under IRC Section 1014, most property someone inherits gets that really valuable step up in basis. But Section 1014C has a huge exception. It specifically says IRD does not get a basis step up. If you misclassify this, you could be handing the beneficiary a massive and totally unnecessary tax bill.
Now, this idea of constructive receipt, this is the linchpin. This is the whole key to shifting that income back where it belongs, onto the final 1040. It's not about whether they had cash in their hand, it's all about control and unrestricted access. So if interest was credited your client's bank account the day before they died, it doesn't matter that the paper statement wasn't printed yet. They could have taken it out. It was available to them. That's constructive receipt.
And just to make things more interesting, you've got revocable living trusts, right? Well, during the person's life, IRC Section 676 says that trust is basically invisible for tax purposes. Everything just flows to their 1040. But the literal instant they die, that trust transforms into a brand new separate taxable entity that needs its own tax return, the Form 1041. Automated systems almost never catch this instantaneous switch, which just adds to the reporting mess.
So, okay, we've got this hard stop, this statutory wall at the date of death. And we've got these messy, consolidated 1099s from the brokers. How in the world do we connect the two? Well, that's where this really powerful legal idea comes in, the Nominee Doctrine. It's our legal bridge.
I love this quote because it just cuts right to the chase. The tax law, at its core, cares about substance over form. It's always asking who truly benefits from this income, not just whose name and tax ID is on the 1099. The tax bill follows the true, beneficial owner of the money.
Okay, so that's the theory, but how do you actually prove it in practice? Well, the courts, in cases like Homeman v. United States, have laid out a test. And when you think about it, an estate or trust that gets income that was constructively received by the decedent pre-death, well, it checks all these boxes, doesn't it?
For that specific slice of income, the trust is just acting as an agent, a nominee for the person who passed away. All right, enough theory. Let's get down to brass tacks. How do you actually do this on the tax returns? What are the practical step-by-step mechanics you need to follow?
You have to follow these 3 steps, and you have to do them in this exact order. It's crucial. Step 1, you report the full amount from that messy 1099 right on the trust's tax return, the Form 1041. Step 2, on that same return, you back it out. You subtract the portion that belongs to the decedent as a negative line item called a nominee distribution. And finally, step 3, you, from the estate or trust, issue a new, correct Form 1099 back to the decedent. This creates the perfect paper trail for the IRS.
And listen, I really can't stress this enough. That first step, it is absolutely non-negotiable. Why? Because the IRS has an automated computer system. If it sees a 1099 was issued to the trust's tax ID, but it doesn't see that exact gross amount reported on the trust's return, it's going to automatically kick out a CP2000 mismatch notice. You have to show them you got it first, then you can explain why it's not all yours.
Okay, so the general rule is pretty clear, right? But things can get a little hairy depending on the specific asset. Let's dig into 2 places where people often trip up: bond interest and income from S-corporations. You really want to burn this table into your brain because these 2 are treated completely differently. For bond interest, Treasury Regulation 1.691A-2 is clear. For a cash basis taxpayer, the income is taxed when it's paid, period. You don't get to prorate it. But with S-Corps, it's the total opposite. IRC Section 1377 mandates a per-share, per-day allocation. So the income earned each day before death must go on the final 1040.
All right, we have covered a ton of technical ground. So what's the bottom line? What are the key things you really need to walk away with today and start using in your practice?
At the end of the day, think of the Nominee Doctrine as your bridge. It is the tool that lets you span that gap between sloppy automated financial reporting and your absolute fiduciary duty to report and pay the correct amount of tax. This isn't just a trick to use in an audit. It's your proactive, affirmative compliance tool.
And that really leaves us with one final thought, and it's a big one. In a world where all your clients' financial data is becoming more and more automated, what's your real value? It's applying this exact kind of nuanced, legally grounded, strategic thinking. It's your professional judgment, and that is the essential human element that no algorithm is ever going to replace.